Okay, Boker Tov. Today's daf is Nun Daled. We're a bit back, so we start on Nun Gimel Amud Bet. And we were talking about the way the Kohen Gadol would walk backwards out of the Kodesh Kodashim, and then we translated that to walking backwards when one departs from his Rebbe, so sort of the transference of that sense of the center from being the Mikdash to Torah and the representative of Torah, and then to more of a direct God encounter, the stepping back when one finishes Shemona Esrei. So now we are on Gimel Amud Bet. Where the Gemara says like this: Tanya Namihachi, the second line from the middle-sized lines, very beginning. Well, the one who prays has to step 3 steps behind himself, 3 steps backwards. And then say Oseh Shalom. And if he did not do this, it's better not to have prayed, because I guess the way you end the prayer sort of, affects the entire nature of the prayer, and therefore the whole thing is worthless, which is a pretty harsh statement. So Rashi says, "Roy shelo hitpalel, Roy hayalo im lo hitpalel." No, okay, right? No, he doesn't add anything. Okay, it would have been better not to have prayed. Mishum Shmaya Amru, in the name of Shmaya, they said, "Shenosein shalom liyamin, rachach lismo." First you say, oh, say shalom b'marav. First you give peace to the right, and then you do it to the left. Now, if anybody knows, we do it the opposite, and we'll get to that in a minute. Shenemar mimino eshtas lamo. From God's right hand is the law of fire to him, to the people. So God, you first focus on the right. V'omer yipo mitzidcha elef revava miminecha. 1,000 shall fall by your right, and a myriad should fall by your side, and a myriad by your right. So myriad is 10,000, much more than 1,000. So again, the general preference of halacha to the right. So the Gemara says, but we're not done. My v'omer, what's the extra pasuk adding? V'chitema orcha demilsahi l'misav yamin. Sure, God gives the Torah in the right hand, because you normally do things with your right hand, since most of the world is righties. Talking here from a small, I'm talking here as a lefty. Actually, everybody in my family, my wife, my kids are all lefties. Anyway, Tashma yipom mitzidcha elef reva miminecha. So you see, it's not just about the act of giving something. In general, there's a favoring of the right hand. So that would seem that you first say Oseh Shalom Brim Ramav, you bow to your right. Okay, but we're not done. Rava chaz yele Abaye, Rava saw Abaye, Yav Shlam Ali Yamina Bereisha. First he said that he did this. First he said Oseh Shalom Brim Ramav to his right. Amalei, and now he corrected him. Me Savis Yamin Vidach. No, you got it wrong. We don't mean first you give peace to your right side. First you say it to first you bow to your left side. Why? Because you're leaving God. So giving shalom to the right means to the right as if God were in your presence, which means to your left, to God's right. And that is what we do. They did the three backward with one prostration. Presumably they were bowed down as they did the 3 steps backward. So it's not just another way of taking leave is bowing down. And we mentioned that also yesterday about Rabbi Eliezer, who would prostrate himself on the ground until Rabbi Yochanan had departed. Okay. So that is walking backwards, and again, an interesting intersection of Mikdash and Tefillah, and from that we transition to the next intersection of Mikdash and Tefillah, when the Kohen Gadol would leave, and after he left the Kachei Kachim, he would make a small prayer in the Heichal, before exiting the Heichal. That's now going back to the Mishnah. So my matzli, what would he pray? Rabbi bar Ravada, Ravim bar Rav Adat, Ravayim Mishmei de Rav Amri. So both of these say in the name of Rav. Here's what he would say: Maybe thy will that this year shall be Geshuma u'shechuna, rainy and hot. So the Gemara says, Shechuna mal yusahi? What? It's like an overly hot year a good thing? I mean, the emphasis of Shechuna means more hot than normal. Ella ema, no, here's what he would say. Im shchuna tehei geshuma. If it's going to be too hot, let it at least also be rainy to offset the heat. And this was our primary concern, of course, about the crops, not about just their own comfort. Rav Acha, if anybody remembers the liturgy of Yom Kippur, after we do the whole avoda, right? We have that the Kohen Gadol would say it's prayer, and we have not a very short prayer, we have a quite long one, right? I think it's with the Aleph Beis and the whole thing. Somewhere there is Geshuma im Shechuna, right? Let it be rainy if it's going to be hot, but it's a quite whole long paragraph prayer, not a short one like this. Right, right. So anyway, but what's interesting is that of all the things to single out, it was this issue, which just sort of shows the reality of being in an agricultural society. Like, the one thing you're going to say is this one thing. So it's about the concern that the weather would be, appropriate and would be as is needed. So the Gemara says Rav Acha Breid Rava Misayim Ba Mishmeid Rav Yehuda. So that felt that wasn't enough just to pray for the weather. So he had the following conclusion. Now it doesn't mean that this is what he would have said if he were the Kohen Gadol. Is he reporting what he believed the Kohen Gadol actually did say? Anyway, but here's how he ended it. So Lo Ya'adi, and it's interesting also now the shift from Hebrew to Aramaic. Lo Ya'adi Avig Shulta Midbeis Yehuda, shall not be removed those that embody dominion from the house of Yehuda. Meaning, let us, the idea that the kings come from Yehuda, and the belief that that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi was a direct descendant of David HaMelech, which was the sense that even in the Bayis Sheni, even though they were under foreign dominion, they still had a degree of their own political control, and the fact that Rabbi was from the house of Yehuda, the house of David, gave them that sense of that they still are some degree of autonomy and of self-dominion. So here that would be one of the prayers, that we should retain that as a nation. So that's actually quite powerful if you think about it, because for us, the one thing you would want to say is, let it be good in terms of health and parnasa, but thinking here at a national level, right? Because the Kohen Gadol is now representing the nation at a national level. So first of all, weather applies to everyone, and it's sort of the economic well-being of the people, but also the sense of a certain degree of autonomy and of still maintaining, some sense of self-dominion. Not really, because you're under foreign rule, but nevertheless. So let dominion not be removed from the house of Yehuda. Do not let your people Israel need to support one another. This is just making it broader than just the weather issue, but about the issue about parnasa. So lefarnei zemizeh means, if everybody, the Marsha sort of refers to a famous Gemara in Brachos, where David's advisors come to him and say, there's, everybody is poor. So he says, just let them do business with one another. So, so it says, that won't work. If everybody is poor, there's no money coming in. So what you want is I'm sure there's an economic term for this, but what is it? When more money is coming in from outside of the country than going out?
Positive balance of payments.
Okay, there you go. Positive balance of payments. Anyway, so let us not all be just moving money from one pocket into the other. Let there be actually incoming money, and let it be a good year economically for everyone. And this is getting back to the weather-specific issue. Let not enter in your presence, do not listen to the prayer of those that are going on the roads, because those that are going on the roads don't want it to be rainy. So their own, little self-interested personal concerns are certainly not more important than the national concerns about the proper weather, which often involves a good amount of rain. Okay, so where were we? Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa have a Now we're going to talk about a prayer of Ovrei Drachim. Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa was going on the way. Shara mitra alei. So rain started pouring down on him. Amar, he said, Ribono shel olam, Master of the world, of the universe, Kol olam kula benachas, v'chanina b'tzar. Everybody has it so wonderful. Everybody's home. I still here in the middle. Have 10 miles left to go. I'm in pain. Pasach mitra. So the rain stopped. Ki also lebeisei. Then he got home. Amar, he said, Ribono shel olam. Kolom kula b'tzar, everybody now is in anguish because thanks to me you stopped the rain. V'chanina benachas, I should have it easy. What about all the farmers? So asamitra. So then it started to rain. Okay, I'm not sure what we're supposed to learn from that, other than it's like a type of a miracle. We do have some of these miracle stories about certain Amoraim or certain Tanaim that God would automatically listen to everything they would say. So I suppose if God's going to equally listen to you to start it again when you get home, you can pray to Him to stop it while you're still on the way. Okay. I'm Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef said, Maya Hani late Salusay the Kohen Gadol Gabi Rabbi Chanina Mendoza. What good would the prayer of the Kohen Gadol do with Rabbi Chanina Mendoza in the world? Rabbi Chanina Mendoza, God is always going to listen to him. All right. Tana Rabbana. Ma'izah Kohen Gadol. There's a story of one Kohen Gadol. Echad sheherich b'tfilaso. He took a long time in his prayers. Sherich b'tfilaso, and I lost my place. V'nimnu echav hakohanim likanes, and they took a vote, and they decided, even though it says that nobody can go in, but nevertheless, he hasn't been coming out. Maybe he's dead. We got to send somebody in. Likanes acharav. Hitchilu him nichnasim. They were about to enter in. V'hu yotzei, and he walked out just as they were about to enter in. Amrullah, they said to me, why did you take so long to pray? Amrullah, he said to them, what, you've got a complaint against me that I prayed for the well-being of you, of the people, and of the well-being, interesting, a theme we had not seen yet, about the well-being of the Mikdash, because it's interesting to think, like, at what stage of the Mikdash were they concerned? In the Bayis Rishon, it's quite clear that, like, 100 years leading up to the destruction or more, they knew that that the end was in sight. But in the Bayis Sheni, at what stage did they start feeling like that they were under threat of it being destroyed? So one again wonders if it's not the rabbis projecting backwards and imagining that, even at the time of the Bayis Sheni, they were praying that it not be destroyed. Yeah, I don't have the exact date. So anyway, that's what. So is it a problem for you that I prayed for you and I prayed for the Beis Hamikdash that it shouldn't be destroyed? Amrullah, they said to him, I'll take Ragil Lasos King. You know what? Thanks a lot, but do not get into the practice of doing this. We have a Mishnah. Again, talking about a little anachronistic, right? So the Mishnah says you're not supposed to day a long davening. Again, obviously there were rabbinic teachings still at the time of the Beis Hamikdash, early Mishnayot, but Sharei Shaninu obviously seems to suggest already the literary corpus of the Mishnah, which they were quoting him. So it's a little anachronistic, but you get the point. Don't be such a tzaddik, not even just for yourself, a tzaddik for other people, if that's not appropriate in this setting, and you're going to get everybody worried. Yes.
Have you ever heard this? Maybe it's somewhere in the Gemara, or maybe just sort of lore. They used to tie a rope around the Kohen Gadol.
Yeah.
So then, if they had
that's certainly not in this story. I don't know where that's from, but it's not in this story.
Have you heard that too?
Yeah, I have heard that.
They have a note in the Zohar.
It's in the Zohar, the rope idea?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, next Mishnah.
I guess in this case they didn't, right? So, otherwise,
okay. The Gemara wasn't told about the Zohar. If the Gemara only had art scroll, would have been so much better. Okay.
Then there's a question about excess vestments.
All right. I will let the art scroll figure that out. Mishanita Aron. Now that we told the story that putting the incense in front of the Aron, but the Gemara pointed out that was also anachronistic because it conflated the reality of the two curtains with the Bayis Sheni to the reality of the Aron in the Bayis Rishon. So this Mishnah addresses the fact that they did not have it in the Bayis Sheni. Mishanita Aron, from the time the Aron was removed, Evan Heiser Sham, there was a stone there. Yemos Nevi'im Mishonim, and that stone, it was already there even from the time of the Aron, from the time of the early prophets. So of course, if that's true, what was the Aron sitting on top of the stone? Was it that the stone was uncovered? After the Aron was removed, was it like beneath the ground and they had uncovered it?
One place to another.
When you say it was there from the time of the Nevi'im Rishonim, it doesn't mean that it was somewhere else. Okay, all the rocks were there in the world from the time of the Nevi'im Rishonim. It means it was there. So it's not exactly.
From the Dome of the Rock?
Presumably. I mean, that's, okay.
It's not like the rock here also.
I understand. It could have been underground, though. V'shtiya haisani kreis. And it was called the shti'ah, the foundation stone. Gavo minat shlosh etzba'ot. 3 finger breadths above the ground. So that's not too much. That's like an inch. So that's not a very big stone. Now, I don't know. I heard, maybe your footnote would also say where, I don't know where this comes from, that what it actually means is not that the stone was only 3 finger breadths. It means that it actually hovered above the ground miraculously. You can take a look if the footnote says that. That's not what the words say. Now, the rock of the Dome of the Rock is pretty big, right? How big is it? It's huge.
There's a picture of it here.
Yeah, okay.
So it's not that it extends. I thought it just extended a while. Not that it's just so small, 3 inches high. But it means it goes very far.
It could.
So that's why it can be Gedola.
Right. Oh, yeah. I'm not questioning the Gedola. I'm just questioning the fact that the Dome of the Rock, if that's what it is much taller. So that I don't know. Anyway, okay.
Well, the topography has changed.
Yeah, that's true. Also, it could have been that it got that it was below the ground. Most of it was below the ground, and that got exposed. Or right. Anyway, and there's no.
We don't know where the Kodesh
Well, first of all, you have to first assume we're identifying the Evan Shtiel with the dome of the rock. So I don't know. I mean, there's a logical reason to make that identification. They're both supposed to be in the same place. They're both talking about big rocks. But, I'm not an archaeologist. I don't know what they've said. But archaeologists have a pretty good sense of what the dimensions were and where it was, which is how you can have from tours up on Har Bayis, because they can avoid going into the Azara, because they do have a pretty good sense, about where that was. Yes.
Nevi'im Rishonim, that started long before the Arang was in
right,
Jerusalem.
Right. So that's my question. Well, no. They didn't. It was there. It was on Har Bayis. It wasn't there wherever the Mikdash was. The rock was on that place in Har Bayis. But again, my question just is that was the Aron on the rock? Was the rock not yet uncovered at that time? Okay. Does what's his name Steinsaltz say anything about the identifying of the rock with the dome with the rock?
This says the ark was placed on the rock.
Okay, so put the ark on the rock. But in terms of identifying it with the dome, with the rock.
According to many sources, the rock is the foundational. So.
Many. He doesn't say who's the many
He doesn't
are.
say who they are. No.
Okay, fine. All right.
Hebrew probably would.
All right. Okay, moving on. Okay. And he would put the incense on the rock itself. So now we're done with the incense. Okay? So he walked backwards. We already said that. Now we're just sort of footnoting what they would do in the Bayit Sheni. But now he left the Azara after doing the incense. So he gets the blood of the ox from the one who was stirring it. Remember, the guy was stirring it by the steps leading up to the ulam or the azara. He enters where he had entered. He goes back with the whole curtain thing to being now in front of the aron or in front of the rock. He stands where he stood. And he sprinkled one up and 7 down. He wasn't trying to sprinkle on the aron or on the rock itself. Lo lamala v'lo lamata. Not that one should be high. One drop of blood should hit high and one should hit low. That wasn't the point of high and low. That he was trying to make the blood hit at a high point and at a low point. Ella kamat sleef, but like a what?
Flicking?
Like a flicking. Yeah, that would be a good translation. We'll worry about that tomorrow. We're going to focus tomorrow. We're going to get to the act of the sprinkling. The and here's how he would count. Achas, 1, the one above. Achas v'achas, achas v'shayim, achas v'rosh, achas v'arba, achas v'chamas, achas v'sheish, achas v'sheva. Okay. So, Yotzav v'iniach al kan hazahav. He went down and he put the blood of the ox on a little gold pedestal that was in the heichal, presumably near the entrance to the Kodesh Kodashim.
Didn't need to be mixed anymore.
We'll get it. Now he has not yet shechted the goat. Remember, and I also want to remind you, he doesn't do a vidoy on the goat that's for Klal Yisrael. He only does a vidoy in the vote that gets sent Lazazel. But the one that has the parallel of vote of the ox, although he did 2 vidoys on the ox, he doesn't do a vidoy on the goat. All he had done with that goat until now is drawn the lots. Now you take this goat, shachto, he shachs it. He also does the kabbalas adam. He catches the blood in a bowl. Nichnas l'makom shenichnas. He goes back to where he went. V'amad b'makom shamad. He stood where he stood.
He's inside the Kodesh
Kodashim. He's back in the Kodesh Kodashim. V'izim mimenu achas amad v'sheva l'mata v'kach hayam moneh achas v'shayim v'chulei. Okay, the Mishnah probably had it all, but when they wrote it back, when they put it into the Bavli, they decided to shorten it a bit.
Presumably he's master here too, right? Even though it didn't say.
Yeah. He does the exact same thing. He went out and now put it similarly on the gold pedestal. A second gold pedestal. Shebeheichal. There was only one pedestal. Now this is presumably part of Rabbi Yehuda's statement. Why you only need one pedestal? Because first of all, it could be a big pedestal that could have 2 bowls on it. But also, he says, you put one down and you take the other off. So you only need one pedestal. Okay, so he puts down the blood of the goat, and he takes off the blood of the ox, the vessel with the blood of the ox. And now, yes.
Is a seer slaughtered in the heichal?
No. He left the heichal. It doesn't say that he left.
It doesn't say.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a good point. It doesn't say that he left, but he did leave. Okay, he did not do. You're right. It doesn't say that he left. It's a good point. They brought him. I know, but he didn't. We'll see it in the Gemara. You're right. It's missing. That is bizarre. I hadn't noticed that.
You want me to note the note here?
What does the note
I
say?
don't know if you want
Go
to
for
know.
it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it says that they don't bring him to go inside the heichal, rather he leaves the heichal for the courtyard and they bring it to him there.
Okay.
Maybe, this is maybe.
All right. Yeah, you're right. It's not there, but that's clear that that's what happened. Okay. You don't do any shechita inside the heichal. Okay. Okay. So now he took he put down the blood of the goat. He took the blood of the par. And now he does the sprinkling. He's outside the Kodesh Kodashim, and he does the sprinkling on the curtain, in the space of the curtain that is opposite the Aron, the middle of the curtain. Mibachutz, out and standing outside the Kodesh Kodashim. One above, some below. He would not try to have them hit above and below, but he would be afflicting. We'll see what that means. He would count the following. And then he took the blood of the goat, put the blood of the cow back on the pedestal, either the same one or the other pedestal. And then he did the same with the blood of the goat on the curtain opposite the Aron. He now mixed the two bloods together. And now you sort of pour one. You're holding. You pour one into the other, and now you have one full vessel that has both. And then you pour from the full vessel that has both back into the empty vessel. If you're trying to mix things well, you pour them from vessel to vessel. So that's what he did.
So you didn't want to take a spoon and stir it or something?
Well, whatever. No.
The original Sheva bracha.
I was thinking exactly about that. Talking about Sheva brachos, we're going to have some very interesting. We're going to have some very interesting agarata coming up. Let's take a look. Mishenignos loktani. It did not say from the time the Aron was hidden, which is what we've been assuming until now. Ela mishenito, from the time the Aron was taken, which might mean taken away. It's not Kamandamar Aron Galal Bavel. So this is not the idea that the Aron was hidden, was in the Mikdash. Is that the Aron actually was brought into exile into Babylonia. The time you talk about Rabbi Eliezer Omer Aron Galal Bavel. The Aron was exiled to Bavel. Shanemar Ulichuvat Hashana Shalach Hamelch Nebuchadnezzar. At the end of the year, the return of the year, Nebuchadnezzar sent Vayavieu Bavela, and he brought him, meaning Tzidkiyahu, I think is what he's talking about. No, Yehoiachin, excuse me, into Bavel. In Klechem dat Beit Hashem, with the desirous vessels of the house of God. What's the most desirous vessel? It's the Aron. So the Aron was taken into exile. All right, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Omer Aron Galal Bavel. The Aron, so another position, a similar position. The Aron was exiled. Shenemar lo yoter davar amar Hashem. Nothing will be left after the exile. So what's davar? Elu aser sadibrot, the 10 Commandments, shabo, that are written in the luchot that are in the Aron. Yehuda ben Laki shomer Aron b'mkomo nigdaz. No, the Aron was buried and hidden in its place underneath the floor, presumably of the Kodesh Kodshim. Shenemar vayiru rashei habadim min hakodesh apnei adavir. The tops of the poles were seen in the in the holy space in the Heichal by the face of the Devir. The Devir is the wall that separates the Kodesh and the Kodesh Kodashim. So they would poke out through the curtain, or they create protrusions, bumps in the curtain. They would not actually be seen, but they would be protruding. And it was there. They were there until this day. So until this day means until any day you read the pasuk, they're still there till today.
What about that?
Okay. No questions. Upliga de Ula. He argues on Ula. Damar Ula. Shal Rabbi Masi ben Charash as Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. So again, this was Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai that said that it was buried there. But now we have Ula that's going to tell that according to Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, it was not buried there. It was exiled. That we have Rabbi Masi ben Charash as Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, Beromi, when they were in Rome. So that's interesting. When you're in Rome, you're thinking about all the stuff that was taken, in the exile, and then you're going to, sort of maybe taken over by Rome. What's being hidden in the treasuries of the Vatican? Anyway, the Kimei Acha, Rabbi Eliezer Melamdeinu, after Rabbi Eliezer teaches us, Pamishon B'Shniya Aron Galul Bavel, that first and second Beis Hamikdash, the Aron was exiled into Bavel. Because one thing, by the way, that was exiled into Bavel. Rishona hu Adam, and the first one, as we said, Vayavir Bavel im Pleichem da Beit Hashem. Shniya Mahi. How about the second one? Tichsiv Vayetzemi Bat Zion Kol Hadara. So now, I'm sorry, I completely said it wrong. Not first and second. Once it was exiled in the first Beis Hamikdash, obviously they didn't have it in the second. Meaning Rishona V'Shniya, meaning that there are two psukim that teach us that by the end of the first Beis Hamikdash, it was taken into Bavel. One is the verse we already quoted, all of the Zyrus vessels means the Aron, and the other Vayetzei mi bat Zion kol hadara, from the daughter of Zion was taken out all of her glory. So, and how does that mean? So again, for us, of course, that means, the most important thing, the Aron. But now we're going to have another drasha that particularly underscores that. My kol hadara. What does it mean, kol hadara? Chadara. So, what's in the cheder, what's in the innermost chamber, right? Like Haviani Hamelach Chadara, and actually we're going to see some quotes from Shir Hashirim, right? Chadarav, Haviani Hamelach Chadarav. So the idea of in the innermost chamber. So that's what was taken out. So we have two psukim that teach us that in the Bayis Rishon the Aron was taken. Ata omer. You, what do you say? Meaning, what's your position? Do you agree that it was taken into Bavel? Amar Lo, Reb Shimon Yochai said back to him, no, Shani Omer, I say, Aron bimkomo nignaz. It wasn't taken into Bavel, it was buried in its place. Shenemar vayarichu abadim, like we said before, vayu sham ad hayom hazeh, it was there until today. So anyway, so that's how it argues on Ula claims that according to Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, it's there, whereas the Breita said that according to Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, it was exiled. So two versions, we're not going to answer, two versions of what Reb Shimon Bar Yochai says. Now, Amalei Rabba Ula. So Rabba said to Ula, my mashma, where do you get from this verse that it's still there? So now we're going to challenge that. Wherever it says until today, does that really mean till now, as opposed to till today when the verse was being written? Does it really mean like forever? V'haksiv, that will give you other psukim that say Ad Yom Hazeh. V'esa Yivusi Yoshev Yerushalayim, and the Jebusites that lived in Jerusalem, Lo Harishu b'nei Binyamin, the children of Binyamin did not sort of conquer. V'yeshev Yivusi b'nei Binyamin b'Yerushalayim Ad Yom Hazeh, and the Jebusites sat with b'nei Binyamin until today. So now you think what they're going to challenge is that there are no Jebusites in Jerusalem. But that we're not going to challenge. Who knows who the non-Jews are in Jerusalem? But it also suggests that Bnei Binyamin was in Jerusalem for forever. But that's not true. You mean to tell me that Bnei Binyamin were not exiled from Jerusalem? So we heard in Rabbi for the 52 years of exile, although we speak about 70 years of exile, actually it's only 52 years after the Churban of the Beis HaMikdash, according to Chazal. It was 70 years after. The 70 years is the 70 years from the time that Tzidkiyahu was taken into exile, but only 18 years after that was the Beis HaMikdash destroyed. So it was actually 15 years from the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. So for those 52 years, lo aver ish b'Yehuda, no man passed through Yehuda, presumably not Jew or non-Jew. Shenemar, certainly not Jew. Al harib aseh b'chiva nehi, on the mountains I will lift up cry and wailing. Val naos min bar kina, and a eulogy in the wilderness. Kini tzumi bli ish over what? I'm not sure the glory, the dwelling places, or the anyway. Because they have been desolated from any man passing through, and they have not heard the sound of the flock. From the sky of the heaven until animals. They have wandered and left. So there have been nobody there. And how do you know for 52 years? So Behema and Bigamatria, because Behema and Gematria is 52. Now obviously they already knew 52, but they tied it to this verse, and therefore they said that this verse is that it's completely desolate. There's absolutely nobody there. 1 minute. B'tanya, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yossi says, Sheva shanim niskayim gafris famelach b'Eretz Yisrael. The pasuk says right about the exile, gafris famelach shrefa kol artza, right, sulfur and salt. So he says for 7 years that was true in Eretz Yisrael, that the land was not only was there no people living there, but the land was completely untillable, destroyed. Rabbi Yochanan, my time at Rabbi Yossi, where does he get this idea that the 7 years that Asya bris, he makes it shavak ksiv hacha v'gvir bris la rabim shavua echad, and so the way Rashi says this was being read is that Nebuchadnezzar sort of like imposed the Brit on the masses or on the great ones for 1 week for 7-year period. The Ksiv, and what bris is that? The bris where it says Ksiv Hasam, why is this happening? Why is the land destroyed? Because they abandoned the bris. So that was for connecting to this verse of 7 years. That punishment of Gafrit Vamelach Shrefa Kol Artza was for 7 years. Okay, so anyway, so that's the question. So you see, even though it said they were there until today for the Jebusites and for Bnei Binyamin, they were not there for a period of time. So Ad Yom Hazeh does not mean without cease. So the Gemara says he has an answer. Amalei hacha ksiv sham. It says Vayu sham Ad Yom Hazeh. There somehow means continuously. Hasam lo ksiv sham. It didn't say there. They were until today. So somehow that doesn't have to mean continuously.
Where's the Hachanatim?
What by the Aaron it says vayu sham ad hayom hazeh, and by Bnei Binyamin it says vayeshav vayivasi ad hayom hazeh without sham. So somehow sham means that it was permanent and continuous. I don't exactly get why sham has to do with continuity of time as opposed to continuity of place, but that's what he says the difference is. Yes, Charlie.
The obvious meaning of Ad Hayom Hazeh would be meaning until the time that you also wrote it.
That's what I said. The shot, right.
But so how this would not make sense to have that discussion if that's.
I understand, but they assume that once it's canonized and in the Tanakh, then it will always be true and it will always be Ad Hayom Hazeh.
So
That was the argument. As long as it says somehow the word sham, that makes the difference. Okay.
So they're still saying Ad Hayom Hazeh can mean until the day of the.
Yeah, well, that's why according to the position that the Aron is still there. So we're not done. So the Gemara says, "Sham la'olamu." You really mean every time it says sham until today that it means forever? Maybe I'll ask you on that. Umehem min b'nei Binyamin, and from the people of Binyamin, halchu lahar Seir. They went to the Mount Seir. Anashim chamesh miyot, 500 people. Uplatia v'nara v'rafia v'uziel b'nei Yishai b'rosham, and these 4 people were heading them. Vayaku et sheirita pleita l'Amalek. They wiped out the remnant that was for Amalek. Vayeshu sham arei. They remained there until today. So how could it be that they are still there in Har Seir until today? When Sancheiriv came, he put everybody in a different place from where they were, so nobody is where they were originally. I will remove the boundaries of nations. And they're, I don't know how to translate that. Forgot. I looked it up beforehand. They're what? Something. And I plunder their treasures. Okay. Anyway, so you see that it does not mean sham does not mean that they continue to be there until today. So it says, where are we? Yufta. All right, it's a problem. So it does not mean it's literally until today, and you do not have a support from that verse. He still might believe the Aron is buried there, but he doesn't have a support from that verse. Amar of Nachman. Rav Nachman says, Tana, we turn to Brisa, the Chachamim mean the sages say, Aaron Belishka Stir Ha'etzim Hayah. This is what we learned before, when we learned Shkalim and elsewhere, that the Aaron was not taken into exile, was not buried under the Kachei Kachim, it was actually buried in the chamber where they had the wood that they used for the Mizbeach under the floor. Hayaganus, that's where it was buried. Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, Avanan Amitanina, we taught here, it's a Mishnah in Shkalim, which is why we learned Shkalim before Yoma. A Kohen was just, busying himself with something or fooling around, and he saw that the floor was different in one place from the other places. I assumed it meant like the color, the tile was different, it looked dug up. Rashi says it means that the tile was a little bit higher, so it could tell that it had been dug up because it was a little uneven tile. He went and he told his friend, and he was not able to finish getting the words out that the Aron was buried or where it was buried until his soul was left him. He dropped dead. So they knew, maybe they didn't know where in the Dir HaEtzim, or maybe actually did get the words out of his mouth, but they knew that the Aron was buried in the Dir HaEtzim, in the Lishkat HaEtzim. Okay, it says he was fooling around. What was he doing? All right, I don't know how he knows. He was playing with his axe. Okay, Tana debate Rabbi Shmuel. We talked about Rabbi Shmuel. What? Yeah, he was chopping woods, right? Tanya, but I don't know. Somehow, playing with the axe made him. I don't know how that led to him finding it. I don't know why, of all things, he decided to say that. Try to identify that as what he was doing. Tana debate Rabbi Shmuel. My havi of it. Now we have a brighter that's. I'm sorry. Skip the line. Tana debate Rabbi Shmuel. Shnei kohanim bali mumim hayim matlim. Here's a different version or an elaborated version of the story. There are 2 kohanim that had blemishes, so they could not be working in the mikdash. So you know what they did? It's like they sent them to peel potatoes. So they sent them to go to the chamber of the wood and to get rid of all of the wood that had worms in it, to dispose of the wormy wood, to go through stick by stick and dispose of the wormy woods. So hayu matliim be'etzim, they were removing the worms or the wormy wood from the wood. And this is where we have the story about the axe. The axe of one of them slipped, mehem v'nafla sham, and it fell there. meaning basically it hit the floor, presumably underneath where the aron was. So v'yotz eish v'achaloso, and a fire came out of the floor and consumed him. It's like straight
Him or
from.
the axe?
But I could be him. I assume I could be the axe, but I assume to make it consistent with the previous story, it's him.
Then maybe then he noticed and said something. Oh, what's that? Why did the fire come out?
As opposed to the other guy noticing. I don't know, maybe. All right. I assumed it meant him. Anyway, straight out of Indiana Jones. They say the axe? Okay.
They say the axe, but then they say, see, however, you fei einayim citing Yerushalayim, which probably says something.
All right, whatever. Fine, moving on. All right. Rav Yehuda Rami. Rav Yehuda showed a contradiction. See, one verse says, Vayiru Rashi Abadim, that the heads of the poles were seen. The other verse says, V'lo yera'u achutza, they were not seen. HaKetzad, so what does it mean? Were they seen or not seen? So nirin v'ein nirin. They were seen, but they aren't fully seen. What does that mean? Tanya Namihach, we thought similar. Vayiru Abadim, they were seen. Yachol lo yuzazim mimkoman. Maybe it means that they were not moved from their place because the aron, right? The aron was, if this is the Kodesh Kodashim, right, and this is the aron. Well, it's not exactly square, but you get the idea. The aron only took up a small part of the Kodesh Kodashim, and even with the staves, they would not have. The Kodesh Kodashim was 20 amot. Right, 20 amot by 20 amot, we said. The aron was like what? Like, an amatayim v'chetzi, 2.5. So even however long the staves were, they weren't like 10 amos long on each side. So if the staves stayed in their places, they would not have gotten up to the front, and this was dead center, it would not have gotten up to the curtain, it would not have gotten up to the front of the Kodesh Kodashim. So yacholu yuzazim mimkoman, perhaps they would not be moved from there, they would be like, exactly where they should be alongside the aron. Talmud Lomar, where am I? Talmud Lomar, vayarichu abadim. They were lengthened, which now you could say that means somehow miraculously they were lengthened. The Mashal makes it sound no. All it means would that they actually would move the staves so they would not be centered. They would be still in the the sockets or the loops
rings,
or whatever, the rings that were alongside, but they would not be evenly centered. They would basically pushed forward. What we're going to see, that they would be pushed forward so that the tops of the staves, while it's still alongside the around, the tops of the staves could reach the curtain of the katshe katshe. Okay, so he said, so vayarichu habadim. They were lengthened. They were
they weren't very long staffs still.
They were long, but they weren't 20 amos long. Maybe they were 10 amos long or 12 amos long. Okay. Maybe that's now that they were going up to the front of the curtain, maybe they would tear through the curtain and come out. They would not be seen. So they were pushing against the curtain, but they were not visible. So what was happening? So they would push and protrude, and and they would be not coming out, but they would be making a bump in the paroches. V'nirin kishnei dade isha, and it would look like a woman's breasts. So you would sort of see the outline of it without actually seeing them. Shenemar tzror hamor dodi li bein shadai yalin. Quoting a verse from Shir Hashirim, a bundle of myrrh, my beloved is to me; he will rest between my breasts. So seeing now that becomes, and this is going to be the next piece of what we're going to learn, a very erotic imagery of the Aron and the relationship of Bnei Yisrael to God, which is what Shir Hashirim is. It's in not just romantic, but even erotic, and in a way that's extremely powerful. It calls on some of our most powerful urges, which is also this desire to unify and to with somebody else in a very powerful way, and translates that into the context of of God and Bnei Yisrael. Look, we know that in other traditions, like in Eastern traditions and in Islam, there was a lot of sort of erotic, in Indian, right, a lot of erotic poetry in the sense of within intersecting with religious and sort of bringing those two together. I mean, the only thing we sort of have clearly of that is Shir Hashirim, but when it gets played out in some of the descriptions that we're about to deal with in terms of the Aron and the Kodesh Kodashim and God and Bnei Yisrael, and I want to say something about that, which is the power of. Remember, we said before that it said Chadara by the Aron, and I quoted before you Havyani Hamelech Chadarav. So who is going into the innermost chamber? It's the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. So thinking about the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur,
Lovers.
going in as right to the innermost chamber of the beloved, the bedroom where God here as the woman, which by the way is also worth pointing out that most of the imagery, God is the man and Bnei Israel is the woman. Here God becomes the woman, like the object, if you would, of desire, right? And the one that the Kohen Gadol is now entering into her chambers, where you see the feminine form, right, protruding out with Yaron and entering in. And it's actually this verse, right? Tzror hamor dodi li bein shaddai yalim. Myrrh is a incense. It's a ketoret. So, and you put the ketoret between the badim, bein shaddai yalim. So that's exactly what you're doing. You are going in to be one, sleep with, as it were, the beloved, and placing the myrrh that right there, Bein HaBadim. So it's really very powerful in translating this imagery of Shir HaShirim to this meaning of the Kohen Gadol entering into the Kodesh Kodashim. And again, I don't know if this is intended or not, but you might have. I didn't note it at the time, but you might have noted that when we talked about entering in the Kodesh Kodashim without a purpose, the phrase used was Bia Rekanit. Bia, right, entering in, right, which is the same, right, which is the same word for intercourse, right? So there's very powerful erotic imagery here, particularly around this entering into the Holy of Holies, the innermost chambers. And I really think the placing, I don't know, somebody else must have said this before me, but the idea of placing the incense between the badim and Tzror hamor dodi li bein shaddai yalin is seems to be very much being, indicated here. Amar Rav Ketina, so said Rav Ketina, B'shasha Yisrael olim laregel, when Israel would go up for the regel, migalim lahem et haparoch, that they would pull aside, roll up the curtain in the Kodesh Kodashim. Now, how they would see that, because they weren't allowed in the Heichal either, but if you remember, all the doors of the Heichal and the Azara were all in a line. So presumably they would pull aside the curtains of all of the doors, and they could see straight into the Kodesh Kodashim, even if they were in the Azara. Okay, and they would do this. Umarim lahem et hakruvim shayu mu'urim zeh b'zeh. And now this is going to play out in terms of the kruvim, which were two angels or two human forms, and they saw them that they weren't just standing opposite. Somehow, miraculously, they were intertwined one in another. Omim lehen. I mean, you see that in Greek and Roman art, right? Don't you know how they draw these figures intertwined, lovers intertwined? And they said to them, the Omim lahem, Ru'u chibaschem lifnei hamakom. See how beloved you are before God. Ki chibas zachar v'nekeva. If we needed it spelled out anymore, like the love between male and female. Also, that's why zachar v'nekeva is very not ish v'isha, right? It's very much physical and sexual, right? Much more than even ish v'isha. Now, what of course is a little bit challenging here, beyond this erotic imagery, is that the exposing of it, right? That isn't that sort of ruining the whole thing? Isn't the whole point that it takes place in the private and in the Holy of Holies, the most intimate of act? But they're obviously dealing with the problem of how do you let other people than the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, sort of be, impacted by this whole by this reality. So you have this idea of almost peeking into the bedroom.
The blood on the parochet plays into the way.
Oh, that's interesting. What you mean, like hymenal bleeding, Oh, that's a very interesting thought. That's very interesting. Wow, I hadn't gone that far. That's very interesting. Okay, Masi Rav Chizda. So Rav Chizda asked, now, how could you say that they exposed it like this? I mean, we have in the Mishkan in the Mishkan, it says that before the Leviim would come to carry the vessels, they could not see as the vessels were being put away into the bags. When the vessels were being put into their various bags, shalahem, they could not. That's what the verse means. They could not go and see it. And here you're talking about this type of exposure. So Amar Nachman, Mashal Lakala, it's like a bride. While she's in her father's house, meaning even after Kiddushin, but they hadn't started living together. It's not yet Nisuin. So she's still living in her father's house. So Tznuah Mibala, she's very modest. She's very, even though the man is her husband, they haven't started living together yet. So she doesn't expose herself. Even Shabazal of Eis Chamia, when she comes to her father-in-law's house, which is quite funny, it really means her chassan's house, but the chassan was living with his father. So once it's nisuin, ain't it's nuam mibala, then she's not so modest with her husband, and therefore she's willing to allow herself to be seen more. Now, of course, what's amazing so the answer is, in the time of the Mishkan, they were just married. Bnei Israel and God were just married, so God had to adopt more privacy. And by the way, if it was unclear before, God is here the woman, right? The same way it was the Aaron was like the woman and the breast, God is the woman. So when they were just married, God was still very private. While God is dressing and undressing, He doesn't want he to be seen. So go out. I gotta guys, I don't want you shouldn't be seeing the vessels naked, right? Then they've been living now together for a lot of years, and it's a few hundred years later, and they have a Beis HaMikdash. Now it's okay. Every now and then, you remove the curtains and you're able to see. But by the way, what else is sort of powerful about this is, again, the use of the phrase Beis Avi and Beis Chamia might just have been a way to say Kiddushin and Nisuin, but also if it's Beis Chamia, so God moving sort of to Harabayis is moving to the father-in-law's house. It's almost like, again, by casting God as the woman, especially in this patriarchal society, and the man is therefore the one that sort of is the one, it's his house, his control, and she's entering into that. So it's like the Beis HaMikdash. I think there's something how it's like, with so much focus at the Mikdash is like Makom HaShechina, not our place, right? But here it's actually, the Mikdash moving in is like, it's moving into our land, moving into our house, and therefore it's like, we have actually a little bit more sense of freedom in this relationship because God is now in our land as opposed to when we were out in the wilderness, then we were less balabayas. So I think that's also interesting and part of this whole imagery that it's setting up.
It's very empowering of human beings.
Right.
Logically.
That's what I'm saying,
And
yeah.
Right. And the irony is that by projecting God as the woman,
Yes.
sociologically, it maintains.
Right, it reinforces. Right, it reinforces the patriarchal type of reality. But working within that reality, it's very powerful to be casting Bnei Israel as the man. And now God is entering into Beis Chamia. Yeah.
But isn't there a feminist imagery here? If God is the woman, then
yes. Right. Yes, that's the problem when the challenge for feminists who try to take parts of the tradition and sort of make them work at a feminist level, but they're still deeply embedded in the in the patriarchy. So like the Shechina, right, which is the feminine dimension of God, is still not not as positive as the male dimensions of God within the Kabbalistic sort of mindset. So it's not so easy to recast those things. Okay, right. Okay. Anyway, let's read a little bit more. Okay. What do you mean that now things are different? Then how come like this guy died when the fire went out with the Aron, or he tried to tell somebody? It seems like it's still that privacy thing. Now, of course, I thought that whole story was because you didn't want it to be known where it was. It wasn't like an ongoing issue of privacy. But the Gemara reads it that the reason the fire went out or whatever happened was because he exposed the Aron. And so you see that idea of privacy is still there. Amalei, he said back to him, what? After they've been divorced? They were divorced and then remarried. Then it gets back to the way things used to be. So they were divorced after Chorban Bayis Harishon. Then comes Bayis Sheni. Now they're remarried. So now God wants some privacy again. It's not like they've been together for so long that they can be so comfortable with one another. It gets back to the original way it was. Okay. So now let's finish it up. Okay. So b'may yaskina. Now, what are we talking about? So this idea that the staves would be pushing out of the curtain. If it's in the first base of Mikdash, miyave parochas. There wasn't a parochas, it was a wall. Of course, what we're going to say is that, yes, but the doorway of the wall was a hanging curtain. Ela b'mikdash sheni was the second base of Mikdash. Miyave kruvim. There weren't the kruvim. So, it's not even the staves protruding. It was also just pulling back the parochet so people could see.
Like there were no kruvim in Bayit Sheni?
Yeah, because the kruvim were on top of the arrow. La'olam b'mikdash rishon. It was the first base of mikdash. My parochet tebavi, and the curtain was the curtain hanging in the doorways. The Amar Reb Zera Amarav Shlosha Srei Parochas Hay b'mikdash. There were 13 curtains. Shiva Keneged Shiva Sharim, 7 opposite the 7 in the doorways of the 7 gates that entered into the Azara. Shtayim and 2 more. Achaz apitcho shel heichal.
Curtain on the gate.
Curtain, yeah, the gate didn't have maybe an addition to a doorway, presumably. Right, 2, and there were 2 more. Achas lepitcho shel heichal, 1 in the doorway of entering into the heichal. Achas lepitcho shel ulam, and 1 in the doorway of the ulam. So now we're up to 9. Shtayim b'dvir, 2 by the Kodesh Kodashim, as we said, the 2, that were going in different directions, right, with openings at one end and then openings at the other end.
Wait, that's by Rishon?
This is Bayit Sheni, but the same way, by Bayit Sheni, you had curtains in the doorways, in Bayis Rishon. That's the argument. V'shnayim kenegdim be'aliyah, and 2 more on the second story of the of the Kodesh Kodashim. You also had 2 curtains in the story above the Kodesh Kodashim that you would go in to go down when you had to do work. Okay, anyway, we see there were curtains in the doorways. So yes, this idea of the poles protruding and removing the curtain is Mikdash Rishon, with the poles in the doorways. Okay, so Rav Acha bar Yaakov Amar La'olam b'mikdash Sheni. Really, we're talking about the second base on Mikdash. Ukruvim detzurasa havakaimi. Actually, yes, there were not actual kruvim, meaning the poles of the Aron, that was Mikdash Rishon. But the story about removing the curtain and seeing the kruvim, we're not talking about the statue kruvim. We're talking about some type of a image of kruvim. And this image was painted on the walls, or maybe even carved into the walls. Apparently, there were wood walls that lined the stone. So it was, it was wood paneling lining the stone, and carved into the wood was images of kruvim, even though there was no aron, which is quite interesting. As opposed to now we have been thinking just of a rock, you have some type of a memory of the kruvim now being carved into the wall in the back of the Kodesh Kodashim. D'chsiv, and all the walls of the house were some type of an engraving, braided engraving. Now this is Mikdash Rishon, so that at least was there also in Mikdash Sheni. Kruvim v'tamot, cherubs and palm trees, upturei tzitzim, open flowers, v'tzifa zahav miyasher l'mechuka, and a gold fill, was filled into the carvings. So you had carvings in the walls filled with gold. V'ksiv, and it says Kmeir ish v'livyat, which has been read as like the intertwining of a man and livyat. My Kmeir ish v'livyot, Amar Rabbi Bar Shila, K'ish hami'ura b'levaya shelo, like a man intertwined with his accompaniment, meaning with his consort. So again, the kruvim, and not just the kruvim, but the kruvim intertwined, and that you still had even in the Mikdash Sheni. Amar Reish Lakish, said Reish Lakish, when the non-Jews entered in, the foreigners entered into the Heichal, in the Bayis Sheni presumably, they saw the kruvim intertwined. Presumably now we mean the image on the walls, unless it's referring to Bayis Rishon, but presumably it's the image on the walls. Hotziam Lashuk, they took them out into the marketplace. They completely now, they entered into the most private, and they now brought it out into the most public space. Again, the idea of they saw the kruvim and they took them out suggests we're talking more about the actual statues of the kruvim in the Bayit Rishon. But most Mefarshim understand that this is talking about the Bayit Sheni. So they ripped out, if you would, the carvings, the wall paneling, which had this imagery, and they took it out into the marketplace. The Amru, and they said, Yisrael alalu, this Jewish people, Shabirchasan bracha v'kilasan kol, they're supposed to be so holy. Anybody they bless is blessed, like by Avram. Anybody they curse is cursed. They're so holy. Yasku b'dvarim halalu. They should do this type of thing. Have like sexuality in the Kodesh Kodashim. So miyad hizilum. Then they denigrated them. Shenemar kol mechabdeh hizilua. All of those that would honored it, here they honored it. They said brachasam bracha v'kilasam klal. They understood the importance of Yisrael, but now they denigrated them. Kira u'ervarta. They saw its nakedness, its most intimate moment. And this is by the way, quoting the pasuk here from Eicha also could suggest the idea of the first base of Mikdash, which again, it's much more also disturbing and powerful, the actual, statues of the Kruvim intertwined on top of the Aron. But by the way, what's I think powerful about the end of this is, that sex between husband and wife can be the most powerful and intimate and holy of experiences. But then if it's taken out and into the marketplace, right, then it completely denigrates the experience. So in that place, in that context of the relationship of Bnei Israel and God, in that context, that actually was the place where that was holy and that was powerful. But, if somebody looks at it from the outside and they don't have the context, they see sex maybe always as something pornographic, and then, and then they just went ahead and they made it such by bringing it outside. But again, it's interesting the contrast between bringing it out to the shuk as opposed to the way the whole thing started, which is all the ways you have to do and all the procedures you have to do in order to go into the innermost chambers, right? And that's sort of being held as the contrast about the power of that innermost, that coming into the innermost chamber, and if you would, the bringing together of humans and God, and now the end about what happened to the Chorban Abayis and the complete, devaluing of it and denigrating of it. Okay, so we'll pick up tomorrow. Yeah, I'll talk about that tomorrow. Yeah.
But in Shani, all they had were things on the wall, carving.